In this video, we'll talk a little bit more about strings and some of the ways that we can use them. There are two concepts I especially want to point out. The first is called escape sequences, and you can see this reference on the MSDN website of all of the various escape sequences that are available to use inside of strings. Escape sequences start with a backslash character and are followed by a letter which performs a particular response inside of a string. So things like new lines, carriage returns, question marks, characters that we normally wouldn't be able to put inside of strings, since it would cause a compiler error, we can use inside of strings if we write them using escape sequences. The problem that we run into is that not only do escape sequences use backslashes, but file paths, when we're referencing files inside of our code, also use backslashes. So we have an issue where the backslash character, when it occurs in the path or name to a file, can cause some syntax problems in our code. So the second thing I want to point out to you is called a verbatim string. So here is an example of two different ways that we can do this. Since we can't use the backslash character, let me give you an example here. If we didn't have double backslashes in here and we just wrote the path down like we normally would, we would get all of these syntax errors because the compiler thinks you're trying to use an escape sequence by using the single backslash. So if we need to use backslashes in our string, like in this case for a file name, we can either use double backslashes, which tells the compiler that you actually want to use a backslash itself and not an escape sequence, or we can use what's called a verbatim string by using the @ symbol out in front before we start our quote. We can write our string as we normally would and don't have to do anything different to the syntax of that string, and the compiler will accept that. So a verbatim string tells the compiler to exclude escape sequences and interpret all of the characters in a string literally. So we use that @ character out front to inform the compiler that that is our intent. So those are two concepts to think about when you're either reading strings or creating strings, is that we have this option of using escape sequences so that we can have items that we wouldn't normally be able to have, like backslashes and question marks, or even ASCII characters, or when we want to create things like new lines and carriage returns or horizontal tabs. But sometimes we have strings that we need to use without tampering with the syntax or without making them look more complicated and messy, and we can use verbatim strings for that purpose.